Welcome to Dip into the Ink, which is a show on YouTube where me and sometimes a friend dive into a comic book page by page. In the world of X-Men comics, a lot of weird stuff is going on that's really I don't want to talk about it. And since X-Men seems to be very heavy in the zeitgeist right now with 97 and possible talks of them being in the movie, I thought it'd be fun to bring in the comic that really helped kick off this like huge nostalgic entity of the 90s X-Men, which is Mutant Genesis. This is such an interesting thing because it's sort of a reunification of the X-Men because after Giant Size in the 70s, they split up, and then there was X Factor with the original five, and then New Mutants was around. There was like all these different teams, and then they kind of all came back together after a bunch of change, and all these characters changed a lot. And they're finally like one solid team again in the 90s. And this was, I believe, one of the most popular comics ever. I think I maybe a few things have beaten this record, but this was insanely popular. And I thought it'd be fun if since all the X-Men's burgeoning on our own life right now, I decided if we could dive into the comic together and read it. And as a big cartoon person, I was a big fan of the 90s X-Men. That, yeah, but almost more so Evolution. That's a whole other story because I actually grew up with Evolution. Like I would watch it week by week, but this was something that I would like binge watch. I would look for the DVDs or like the tapes, and I would like buy them online, and it was crazy. It was crazy. But let's get into it. I'm rambling. Let's get started. Okay, so right now we have our opening page. It's this big. The thing with this is that you had to buy different comics because it's one big spread of all of them attacking Magneto. But at the time, you had to buy different covers to get it. We don't have to worry about that here. Our opening page is the Stan Lee proudly presents a dawn of a new era. And there are these people in space. They're looking for Asteroid M. It looks like they're being attacked. And we kind of find out that the sort of ship that is pursuing this other ship, there's this big electromagnetic spike. They're like, oh, what's going on? And there's this big firefight. And we find out it's Magneto. I am Magneto. This is my home. And there's this big splash page where he's like doing an iconic like magnetic pose. And it's very interesting because this is Asteroid M, the home that is sometimes on Earth, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's something else, but it's more popularly known as like a base for Magneto. But we see that we have our X-Men Rubicon by Chris Claremont and Jim Lee. Jim Lee's pencils are iconic in this era. There's just something so sharp and kinetic about them that's like, very good for posing, wonderful for posing. And we have Scott Williams as inker, Tom Orchowski as letterer, Joe Rojas colorist, Suzanne Gaffney as assistant editor, Bob Harris editor, and Tom DeFalco editor-in-chief. So we have this big splash page with sort of the credits. And after we get that, we go to another page where once again, we can talk about what they're talking about, but Jim Lee's pencils is just the look on Magneto's face is so reminiscent of like a god staring at these ants, appealing to him. And it's interesting because that's kind of what's happening. We find out that this ship was stolen by mutants. They went up to Asteroid M to look for him. They say, it's you we came to find. Oh, you, Magneto, we're here to serve you. And Magneto's like, I don't do that anymore. I can't do that anymore. I'm done with it. I tried being a good guy. There's a whole thing with Hellfire Club and Moira. I don't want to get into it. I'm tired. Give me a break. So we cut over to Star City Cosmodrome Baikonur. I'm sorry if I mispronounced anything. And we cut from that Magneto page to this Star City. And it's these guys talking about how the hijack shuttle. And we cut to the next page. And there's this big page that really kind of updates the reader on what's going on. This is meant to serve as information that, there's Magneto up there. And we have to notify everybody. Magneto's clearly on the move doing something. And then we cut to America where White Nick Fury is talking to the president, I believe. And the president's like, what are we going to do? Asteroid M is above our heads. Russia's calling for aid. Who do we call? And Nick Fury's like, he gives a look off panel, and it's like, do you have an alternative? And then after that page, we cut over to another giant splash page. Let's read the little comment box in the corner. It says 40 miles north of New York City, just shy of Connecticut border, a couple miles down Great Malkin Lane from the town of Salem Center, on the grounds of an estate that predates the Revolutionary War, stands Professor Charles Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, a very special school for very special people, to the world, to better known to the world at large as the X-Men. Part of what makes them special is that they're mutants, born with paranormal abilities that set them apart from general run of humanity. And there's this big splash page, and we find out that they're running a training exercise. We have Banshee, Forge, Storm, Cyclops, Beast, Professor X, and Jean inside. They're sort of the inside base. And then we have our outside teams. We see one of the outside teams is Rogue, Colossus, Iceman, and Archangel, big heavy hitters. And they're like ready to rock and roll site. They can hit us anytime. And it turns out that they're starting the mansion. They're going to be testing the mansion's defenses. Go over to the next page where Jean is talking to Professor X. And it's very interesting because this is the first time from what I understand, first time in a hot minute that Professor X has been in the school with students, because there was a time where he was there, and then there was a bunch of stuff with the Shi'ar, and then he was there with the New Mutants, but then he left, and he went on many adventures, and Magneto was in charge of the school, and then nobody was, and I mean he hasn't been there for a while. He wasn't there for the Morlock Massacre. He wasn't there for quite a few events, so this is sort of a homecoming for him, and you see that in the dialogue where he says, so much has changed since I was last in this mansion and taking an active role in the leadership of the X-Men, including myself. It's almost as though we're coming all together for the first time. And he kind of talks to Jean and looks at a picture of the New Mutants, and it's kind of wondering, could I have done more? I know we're back here working together, but is there more to do? And Jean kind of shuts it down because she knows Professor X can get his own head. And she's like, you did what you thought was best, Charles, as did we. Now we pick up the pieces, give it another try, which is sort of the mantra of the X-Men. I feel like they are constantly being shit on, and what they always end up doing is that they pick up the pieces and they give it another try. And that resilience of the X-Men, of mutant kind, is pretty inspiring. So we go from this page to the next one where we cut back outside. Heads up, Popsicle, missiles coming at us from all around the clock. And then Iceman's trying to block it, but the incendiaries of the mansion's defense is blocking his ice slide. And he's like, I can't generate a new ice slide. And then she's like, hang loose, sugar, let me handle this. And then she flies around and she's showing off her abilities. And what this first issue is really doing is that you haven't read the X-Men in a while. You kind of get a sense of what they can do. You see Iceman with his ice slides, you see Rogue flying and diverting. We go to another page where Archangel does a sort of like a mid-air fastball special, throws reversal fastball special, throws Colossus into the building. As Colossus metals up, he breaks through, and we kind of find out that this is sort of like a tag thing where they're trying to break through the mansion's defenses and tag Professor X. So Cyclops and Beast are kind of watching it as Archangel kind of tosses Colossus into the window. Again, this page is very dynamic. It's very posing is great here. He breaks into the room where Jean and Professor X are, and he goes for an attack, but Jean just knocks him out. His metal's great, but for psychic and telepathic attacks is not so great. So she instantly just knocks him out because he doesn't really have any defenses against the telepathic attack. And in our next page, you see Banshee's just like, I'm raiding now, boyo, on Assault Bravo 2 and Assault Look on Psylocke, Wolverine, and Gambit. I took the high road. This one's coming in low. And we, if you don't like accents, you need to leave. Because half of the fun for this, for me, is not only talking about comics, it's doing stupid accents. So I'm sorry. But we have a beautiful page. Once again, I can't stop raving about these pencils. They're so good. Of Psylocke in Quanon's body. It's a whole thing. Psylocke, Gambit, and Wolverine. And they went the low road while the A team is outside doing their frontal assault. The B team's kind of testing the underground systems. And they are beset by a bunch of robots. But the page we look at is, you know what? It's funny because we see a page of Wolverine and Psylocke just busting up these robots. And the thing about Psylocke's costume is that it's very ninja sexy fantasy. It's not practical at all, but at the same time, it's just so iconic. Even Kanan, who has the Psylocke title now, still wears it, even though I think she has better suits. But it's incredibly iconic. Fight the robots. Wolverine goes, man's all heart bets, as much as Gambit is brass. We're supposed to be working as a team. But what the heck? Man wants to play lone wolf. And we see that Gambit has snuck in. He's like, bonjour, cher. Into the same room where Jean knocked out Colossus. And he runs up. He kinetically charges the car. And he grabs Jean. He's like, time to claim my prize, eh? And he goes for a kiss. And the Jean explodes. And it turns out that Jean and Professor X were robots. It was another part of the test. And Cyclops radios in. He's like, under the rules, Gambit. And Gambit's just like, I know Cyclops. I don't know Louisiana French. Je suis mort. I am dead. Like, he failed the test. We go to another page where it is Gambit's kind of like, redheads, they have a dynamite kiss. And Cyclops and Jean Grey kind of banter here for a minute. He's like, at your own risk, my friend. And they kind of do like this tete-a-tete where Professor X is just like, this exercise isn't over. Come on, guys, let's get together. And right as he says that, Wolverine, he snicks his way in with his claws. And you see he's beating a bunch of the robots. There's one on his back, so trying to get him. And he goes, your robot duplicates fooled the cage in, but not me. I know your scent too well. Bang, Charlie, snit. And then his claws go up right across his like in centimeter from Charles's face. Ching! And he's like, you're dead, tag. And then it's kind of a funny moment because Cyclops gets mad. He's like, yeah, you made your point. Like, you know how dangerous your fucking claws are. One slip and you'd kill him. And Wolverine kind of responds like, I don't slip, bub. Exercise was to tag the prof, and that's just what I did. You got a problem with that? Even used some teamwork to do it. While you were watching Gambit make a moderate fool of himself, Psylocke was able to use her psi powers to mask me from genes long enough for me to do the job. Which is sort of, this issue very much reintroduces you to everyone and what their powers are, but also shows that these aren't kids. These are adults. They've worked together. They understand strategy, and several strategies were implemented during this assault. So this isn't like the giant-sized X-Men issue where they're all learning to work together and learning to explore their powers. This is them sort of renewing the strategies they already have in their playbook. This isn't a team forming for the first time. This is the team reuniting and just reinvigorating their strategies, which I think is really good. And there's a fun part where you glance at the danger room where you see that everyone's kind of like relaxing. And you find out this whole thing took place in the danger room. This whole environment, it was illustrated in danger room, which is crazy. And you see like Rogue kind of shaking her fist at Gambit, and Gambit has this sly smile. And he's like, what do you expect? It's me, Gambit. Which is very fun. And they're kind of like, I got better things to do. And then it's kind of like a fun team moment. But we cut to later where Nick Fury is like, Asteroid M is still cloaked, but we think it's holding orbit over Eurasian hemisphere. Soviets ain't happy about all that. They've pledged not to act unless provoked by their hair-triggered threshold. And Rogue brings up a very good point, which is like, a fight started on his doorstep, but he put a stop to it. As far as anyone knows, all the survivors are pretty much okay. Way you talk, Nicholas, folks expect him to start nuking Mama Russia at any moment. And Scott correctly points out, he's like, there's precedent for the concern, Rogue. And so the government's sort of approaching the X-Men. And what is it? Charles says, I suggest to split the X-Men into 2 strike teams. That will allow us greater flexibility in our response to any given situation. Which is interesting because at this time there is split into 2 teams. This adjectiveless X-Men book is the main title that has one half of the team, and then Uncanny X-Men, which is the book that's been running for a while, is the gold team, and then this is the blue team. So that's sort of our introduction. We're splitting the teams up. And then in the next panel, we go back to the space station after all that, back to Asteroid M. and you see that both the pursuers, humans, and the runners away refugees, I guess, mutants are all aboard the space station safely. One of the guys tried to kill one of the mutants. This woman tries to use her power, but nothing's happening. And they're at like a standstill, like I'm about to shoot her, and then you hear a voice say, "What's the meaning of this?" And we come to Magneto in the next page in the sluttiest robe. This man is big Dilf energy. He has long shoulder, almost shoulder length white hair slicked back, and this white robe, like exposing his midriff. Big old sash and like white tights, and it's just incredibly slutty look. He looks like he'd be on the set of a porno. It's crazy. And the woman who, one of the main, the woman who was held at gunpoint is like, we place ourselves under your protection, and this human pilot shoots her in the back, and she looks at him, Magneto, and she says, "We pledge our lives to your cause." And Magneto kind of responds coldly. He's like, "But I have no more cause." But you see, seeing that death, the death of children, of young individuals, of people, is something that's incredibly triggering to Magneto. Not only when he accidentally hurt Kitty, but his own family. And the next page, it shows his face like very serious. So much markings of like anger is on his face. He's like, "I warned you, your mechanisms are quite impressively shielded, that's true. But I am the master of magnetism. I draw on the primary forces of Earth itself." And it's funny because he like knocks that guy down. And one of the officers is like, "I'm sorry, Magneto, this shouldn't have happened. We're officers of the law, and we have every right to pursue and apprehend these criminals." And Magneto's kind of walking over to the woman and like cradling her. And this one guy, Fabian Cortez, worst mutant. And this sort of incident kind of reignites Magneto's cause, because he was being very withdrawn. He was kind of tired of Earth and everything going on there. So these mutants kind of begging, seeing one of them die in front of him, really reinvigorates how he feels and really lights the fire under his cause again. And we cut back to Xavier's school, where they have a contact from Cerrito where they see Magneto coming. And Professor X is like, "Alert your blue team, Cyclops. I will hold Storm's gold team in reserve." So we have our blue team heading to the jet, and they have no time to waste. And I believe the blue team, as established, is going to be, let me look it up on the page. I'm pretty sure it's Wolverine, Beast, Gambit, Psylocke, Storm, Rogue, and Cyclops, and I believe Jubilee. I'm pretty sure that's the blue team. But they all run to the jet. And we cut to another page where Magneto is going down, and he is lifting up old Soviet submarines and taking out the missiles. And he's kind of like reminiscing of the time when he fought them, because he fought these submarines and buried them and killed the people within it. And he's having sort of this remorseful moment as he takes these missiles out, and it kind of drops them on, and the X-Men show up. And it's interesting because before the X-Men show up, his eyes are like a very pale blue, a very sort of remorseful demeanor. But the moment they show up, eye color changes to red, same red as his helmet almost. And they tried. The thing is that's interesting here is that they very much just tried to not really give him any leeway, because they know how dangerous he is. And the only one that really tries to practice peace and talking is Rogue. She goes, "Been a while, Magneto. Never called, never wrote. I was starting to figure you'd forgotten all about me. That's no way for a friend to act." And he's like, "Hello, Rogue." Rogue continues to say, "We don't threaten you, Magneto. Nobody does." And Magneto's like, "And now, child, nobody will." "Or what? You're gonna nuke them?" Wolverine says. And then the plane kind of comes behind him as it approaches, and Magneto bursts of magnetic energy as he stops the X-plane behind him. And he's like, "I would destroy your pretty new aircraft instead of simply freezing it in place. If I were the villain you believe me to be." And then Beast and Wolverine and Gambit jump out of the X-Jet as the X-Jet flies away. And they try to go for a fight. And they kind of do a bit of a banter as they all fight, where they keep saying like, "Oh, you're not trying to kill us, so we won't try to kill you." And honestly, you have to try to kill Magneto in order to just hurt him because he's just so freaking powerful. It's insane. And I feel kind of bad for the blue team because I think it wasn't established. I think like Omega was established years later, but like Gold Team has a lot, like a couple Omegas, and this team it's a lot of combat people, but it's not like huge heavy hitters. So we cut to Psylocke. She gives him a kick. She goes for a psychic knife. Oh, a metal tendril throws her back. Wolverine tries to slice him. They go into a couple combat pages, and Cyclops blasts Magneto into one of the submarines, and Magneto lands in like this disgusting water mixture where there's like bones around him, and it's such an interesting narration here because it says all this time he thought about them in abstract pawns instead of men. Now, though, at last he finds himself face to face with the consequences of his acts, and he remembers another time, other bodies, bones coated with the flesh of family and friends, tossed into a lime-soaked pit, and him along with them, only he was left alive. Somehow he clawed his way to the surface, his will to survive as indomitable as now. And it's interesting because Magneto's doing all this as self-defense. He sees that mutants are still hurt, and he's making these moves in self-defense, but because Magneto is such a big player, anything he does is looked upon as aggression. So the X-Men are meeting in kind when really, honestly, they all just need to sit down. But based on what Magneto has been through, I can understand not willing to talk about it. But they continue to fight a bit in the submarine. Magneto takes the missiles and dips. And it's interesting because Rogue takes after him, and Cyclops is like, "Rogue, what are you doing?" And she goes, "Well, you should have let me do from the start. Talk to the man." And Beast kind of agrees. He's like, "She may have a point, Scott. Our natural tendency to view Magneto as our enemy may have helped precipitate this confrontation." And there's kind of a funny moment because of who they are as characters. Cyclops says, "You bound and determined to be my conscience, Hank?" And Hank retorts, "Every good leader needs at least one," which is Beast is kind of evil right now, so that's just a funny thing to read now. But you see that the Soviet airspace rockets take after them as they're all flying, and Rogue is trying to talk to him, and Magneto's like, "There's nothing to be said." And Rogue is like, What? You never made a mistake in your life? You never committed an act that might be somehow misinterpreted? Maybe Psych handled things wrong. Maybe seeing you about to haul off cargo of nukes gave him cause. Don't you see you got everybody spooked?" And in the next page, there's like such a pleading, because Rogue has her own history with Magneto. There's such like a pleading look in her eyes where she's looking at Magneto with this sort of earnest this kind of earnest look where she's like, "You understand why people are freaking him out, and you're just proving them right. They're viewing you as aggressive." And Magneto kind of responds, he's like, "I did my best to change. I did my best to follow Xavier's path to a peaceful coexistence between Homo sapiens and Homo superiors, and paid for that folly with the blood of innocence." Which is interesting because that when they talk, Soviet rockets shoot, but they shoot Rogue. And she's like, and she's hit. And Magneto, he's like, "There's your answer. They're never going to accept us." And he throws her in like a magnetic bubble and sends her somewhere else. And he sets off a nuclear detonation in the upper atmosphere, firing one of the missiles he stole from the submarines, destroying some of the rockets. And then we cut back to the asteroid where Fabian Cortez, the freaking snake he is, goes to Magneto to kind of beseech him. Where Magneto's very sad. He's like, "There was no hesitancy when they attacked me. There was no mercy. I worked with the X-Men and they accepted me, but now what has changed? Why have they all turned on me?" And then Cortez says something very interesting that will be sort of a theme in the next couple of issues, where he says, "Let my humble powers heal you, as I have my sister from the Shield's ancient weapons." And Cortez is sort of a big player in this arc, and he continues to be a character throughout the series of X-Men, but he's going to try to heal Magneto as Magneto kind of rests from his injuries. And the X-Men are still in the jet. They're kind of flying around. They're kind of looking for Rogue. Magneto sent her to Genosha, I believe. I'm not sure if Magneto saved her or sent her there, but she's over at Genosha, and they kind of give a brief update. I'm like, oh yeah, there are terrorists attacking. So the X-Men head to Genosha, and it's these acolytes, the same guys that were on the space station. They're making trouble, and Rogue starts fighting these guys, and she's already there, and she's having a bit of a tough time. But luckily, the X-Men shows up, the blue team, and there's this big. They go into this big fight where they're all fighting these guys, and it's a lot of fun action. It's a lot of fun action pages, but it's a lot of dialogue. It's reading this. My first X-Men comic really was Ultimate X-Men, I think. So reading this for the first time, really, so I'm tired. Why is this tiring? Reading this for the first time, I didn't realize how much dialogue there was. And it's interesting because there's a lot of cool action poses, but there is a lot of dialogue. And there's a lot of fights. Wolverine and Psylocke get some pretty cool moments. And while the Acolytes are fighting, they kind of get their ass handed to them. And then Magneto shows up in this beautiful splash page where he has his hands out, where he's like, I declare Asteroid M a sovereign world, home and haven to mutant kind. If you're born Homo sapien superior, then you're automatically a citizen, entitled to safe haven above and security below. So it's sort of, he's establishing his own thing by his own nation by having nuclear weapons. And this is big splash page. And what's interesting here is that someone who has an iffy, I don't have a good grasp on the history of the X-Men in the 80s, but the last couple of panels is Sean going to Moira at the Professor X's school. Although I'm pretty sure that's Sean. If I'm wrong, this guy goes to Moira. It is Sean. He's like, Moira, what ails you? What if you be crying? And she's like, oh, Shane, forgive me. I didn't ken know what possessed. That's so bad. I didn't ken what possessed me. Lord, my lord, what have I done? This terrible thing that's happening. Banshee, it's all my fault. And then it ends, and then it says, preview, next Firestorm. So Moira apparently blames herself for the stuff with Magneto right now. That's a story beat that comes up in a few issues later. It's very interesting. But yeah, that's the end of the issue, guys. It was very interesting reading this thing because it's been such a long time and comics have come in such a new and interesting direction. And this, I feel like if you were aware of the X-Men but haven't read them, this would be a good introduction to them. If you are brand new to comics, it might be a bit harder, but I thought this was pretty evenly paced. I enjoyed the dialogue. You got to see everyone on the blue team really exert their powers, and you kind of reintroduce Magneto and what he's about. And I think this is really solid. And I have a very mixed opinion on this because part of me really does love that 90s X-Men and the 90s X-Men vibe. But the thing is that I feel like it's regressive to kind of fall back on nostalgia bait. Now, if you want to take things that were established back then and reinvigorate them and re-examine what they are and reintroduce them, I can understand that, but it doesn't feel like that. I'm a little worried if the X-Men after the fall of Krakoa, if they go back to that mansion, I will jump into that universe and burn it down myself. Sorry, this show makes me very parched, and usually I have a guest to go back and forth with, so I don't talk that much. Oh, when my friends come on and they just talk for like a full minute, I'm so happy because I'm like, oh, I can rest my voice. But yeah, that was the first issue. The writing I felt was really engaging. The art's great, and I don't know. I don't have much to say about it. Have you read the first issue? Do you like it? Do you want me to go to issue 2? Because this is the first like 7. We get into a couple of Omega Red stuff here, but aside from that, it's pretty much it's the Magneto plot and then a bit of Soviet stuff, and that's it. But yeah, if you guys want me to go through the rest of the issue, I can make more episodes. But yeah, tell me what you think of it. Are you excited about X-Men 97? Do you want to see the 90s X-Men implemented in the new X-Men movies? What's your thoughts? You can find all my social links in the description below, and goodbye. Goodbye.